what is it about human nature that might explain at least some of the disappointments we've seen with social media? I think there have been lots of hints out there in psychological research, neuroscientific research, that we simply have ignored. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I won't go too deeply into this, but there's lots of evidence that simply communicating more does not bring people together. Back in 1976, there's a very interesting study done by some researchers at the University of California at San Diego, where they went to a very large condominium development in Irvine, up closer to Los Angeles. And they went in and they wanted to find out how proximity influences the way people feel about one another. So they went in and interviewed a couple of hundred of the residents here. And what they found, the first thing they found, was that the closer the people live to each other, the more likely they are to become friends, the more likely they are to develop a liking of the person. This was not a surprise. There's this long history of research into what's come to be called the proximity effect that tells us that the closer you live to somebody else, the more likely you are to become friends. But they also found that the closer you live to somebody else, the more likely you are to become enemies. And in fact, and this was a surprise, there's at least a little stronger chance you'll become enemies than that you'll become friends. And we know why people who live close together become friends. It's because they meet each other when they're out getting their mail or whatever, and they have short conversations about the weather, about local sports teams or whatever. And when you have those kind of conversations, you kind of develop a liking for another person. But what the researchers found is that the reason people become enemies with their neighbors is a phenomenon they called environmental spoiling. When you live close to somebody, you can see their habits very clearly. And if some of those habits are irritating to you, they don't pick up after their dog, they leave their garbage cans out, they put political signs up on their lawn that for candidates you loathe, all of those things become irritants. And they very, very quickly turn into animosity. Now, if you think about this study and you place it in terms of social media and the internet, what you can see is with the internet as a setting for social relations, we can see many, many more people doing many, many more things, whether it's through Instagram pictures or their posts on Facebook, sharing all sorts of stuff than ever before. And so there's many, many, many opportunities to take offense. But what we don't have are these informal contacts out getting the mail or on the street or on the sidewalk that tend to build empathy. So here's a hint that when you create this virtual society where everybody's in everybody's business all the time, there may not be any dogs doing their business around, but there's lots of environmental spoiling, lots of opportunities for environmental spoiling. There was another research done out of Harvard in 2007, where the researchers decided to look into our assumption that the more we learn about another person, the more we'll like that person. And the experiment consists of getting a whole bunch of people. Some of them were college students, but others were people who were visiting a dating website online. And what they did is they gave people sets of attributes, characteristics of another person, a fictional person. And they varied, they just chose they had this set of a large number of possible attributes, and they chose the number of attributes to give to each person randomly. And what they found, and again, this was a big surprise, is that the more attributes about another person you give to someone, the more likely they are to develop a disliking of that person. And when they looked into this more carefully, they realized it was because of what they termed dissimilarity cascades. So what we know from psychological literature is that the more you feel a person is like you, the more likely you are to like that person. And the more you feel a person is unlike you, the more likely you are to dislike that person. And what they found is when you start giving people lots of information about another person, as soon as you give them a characteristic that is dissimilar to themselves, they begin to place more emphasis on dissimilarity from that point on than on similarity. So this is what they call the dissimilarity cascade. And so rather than necessarily having more information make you feel more attuned to a person, more likely to like them, it's actually on balance, on average, the opposite. You're actually more likely to start to dislike them. And this, again, these are small differences, but what they begin to do is undermine our assumption that more communication is going to lead to more understanding and more fellow feeling. And what the researchers pointed out is that this research actually, in quite a good way, replicates how we learn about other people today. You know, we don't go out and meet them, again, on the sidewalk and just chat. We Google them. We check out their Facebook page. We check out their posts. We size up the messages, the text messages they send us, or their replies to group texts. We're constantly gathering these little attributes about other people and building our understanding of them through this collection of attributes. And so here again, we see a characteristic of the technology that probably indicates that, again, on balance, on average, it's going to have the opposite effect that we thought it was going to have.